Hey guys, today's video is going to be about a machine I recently put together. It's a little bit on the newer side of what I usually do, and this is my Windows XP Core 2 Extreme machine. Kind of based it around a build about the year 2007, and hold on, disembodied voice in my head's talking to me again. Give me a second here. What? LGR did a video on very similar machine, like same year and very similar specs and things in it, huh? Oh, wow. Well, you know this isn't a competition. Yeah, I know people... Well, I'm going to do the video anyways, but thank you for your concern. What? Yeah, I got rid of those bodies. The usual place. So, yeah, LGR did make a video about a very similar machine not too long ago, and I really debated the necessity of me even saying this or doing this little bit here, but I kind of felt compelled to, because I know there's going to be, admittedly, a pretty small minority of people that are going to be like, you know, you just stole that idea from other more prominent, larger YouTube channels. Personally, I think it's a good thing when you have multiple YouTubers in a community looking at something, giving different points of view, and compare with other people. So, yeah, not to go on and on about this or anything. Yes, LGR did a video, very similar build, very similar machine. I can only say that I put this thing together completely independent of him. It is different. It is definitely different from his build, but it's like the same year I kind of went for. It's very samey, so it's just coincidence. 98% of people probably don't care, but you know, there is that small percentage of people that are bleh. And I believe that's all I really had to say about that, so let's get on to the video proper. And before we get into it, I do have one more quick something I want to say. For those of you that are familiar with this channel and have watched it for some time, you know I have sort of a anatomy of series where I kind of look at what I feel is sort of the ultimate build for a certain generation of machines. For instance, we've done, you know, anatomy of a 486, anatomy of a 386, 286, 808, so on and so forth. And I am planning to move forward with that series. Next will be anatomy of a Windows 95 PC, which is pretty much done. I just haven't gotten around to shooting it yet. I just want to make it clear, this machine is not part of that series. So this is not anatomy of a Windows XP machine. Now I do have that planned for some point in the future. That machine is actually more or less done, but it is not this. So this is not what I consider the ultimate Windows XP type machine. It's a really cool and you know, effective Windows XP machine, but it's not what I personally consider sort of the best all-around Windows XP machine. So I just wanted to make it clear this machine and this video is not part of that anatomy of series. So here we go. This is the CPU here. That's kind of the reason this whole build is existing. And I kind of bought this on accident. I was actually looking for a different CPU. I thought this was the quad-core version and I was getting a really good deal on it, but it ended up this is just the Q6800 or the X6800. It's just a dual-core, 2.93 gigahertz. It's an extreme chip, so it has a multiplier unlocked, which is really cool. I was gonna actually, my intention was to put the CPU in my Steam machine computer that I have in the other room that I use to do some light gaming on Steam and light internet surfing on the television in the other room. But you know, I got this chip and I was like, well, it's an extreme, it's still a pretty cool chip. You know, maybe I can make a machine based around it and do some overclocking, make a video out of it. And that's what this is. There we are. Core 2 Extreme. I always like the extreme on there, so even if the chip, you know, isn't that great, if it's an extreme, you know. But yeah, it's cool that the multiplier on this is unlocked, so we can just have a little bit more options with overclocking. Okay, so here's the motherboard I'm using for this build. This board was given to me by a friend that used it for quite a while, and then he figured I might get some enjoyment out of it when he retired it, so he handed it off to me, and this is an Asus P5K Deluxe. So it's a pretty nice motherboard. I believe this came out in 2007, so that's perfect. I am deciding to go with kind of a 2007 build You know, trying to use parts from around 2007. Now, the Core 2 Duo we're using is from 2006, but you know, obviously it wouldn't be weird to use a 2006 CPU in a 2007 board. Maybe you would have bought it in late 2007 as a bit of a more of a budgety CPU, although with the Extreme it probably still went for a pretty penny in 2007. I don't have the numbers though, so I don't know. It was still been a very viable, very capable CPU in 2007. There weren't, it still might have been one of the fastest, if not the fastest overclocked dual core in 2007, maybe. I don't know. There were a lot of quad cores coming out in 2007, but I don't think they were clocked quite as high. So still quite a capable CPU for 2007, so I think it will still all fit that time period just fine. So yeah, this is a pretty nice board. We have the two PCIe x16 slots, although this board only supports Crossfire ATI. I don't have a lot of experience with that side of things, and I am going with the king of 2007 as far as graphics cards go, and that is not a Radeon card, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, this is a pretty nice board. It has built-in Wi-Fi, floppy, we have the ATA 133, DDR2, SATA. It's a really nice board, so it'll be pretty nice for our build. It should be able to overclock nicely. Only have one PS2 port, but that's just fine. We're going to be using USB probably for at least for the mouse. So built-in audio. I'm probably just going to stick with the built-in audio. At this point in time, audio on motherboards was pretty decent. I don't know. I might throw in something else depending. But we even have optical out there, so we're good. So yeah, this is the Asus P5K Deluxe. Pretty decent board. For a fan, I wanted to do something kind of cool and fancy, and I have this guy in the box. I picked this up at a swap meet, and this is a Zalman, all copper. The CNPS 9700 LED is pretty well regarded from what I've read online. So this is a pretty decent. I don't know if this is a high-end cooler, but it might be. But yeah, this is going to be hulking and awesome for overclocking, I think. Now, I originally wanted to use this in my AMD build. I don't know if that video is going to come out before or after the video for this machine, but this didn't have the sort of connector or the thing you need to connect it to socket 939, but it did have the one for LGA 775. So rather than hunt down a clip for this, I'm just going to use this in this board, at least for now. So for cooling, thermal paste, I looked at a couple options. I originally was just going to go all out crazy. Maybe I was either going to do like liquid cooling or I was going to use like liquid metal. Liquid metal seemed too risky. It's conductive, and it just seems like a mess to deal with, and I just don't want to risk it. So I wasn't going to go that route. And then I was like, well, here's something really extreme. Let's do some liquid cooling. I don't have much experience with liquid cooling though, and in the end, it doesn't seem like socket 775 liquid coolers are, well, I mean, they're abundant, but now, you know, everything's new. When you go on eBay and stuff, everything's for new. I just didn't feel like sorting through. So I'm just going to go with our air cooling for this. So I think that's just fine. Now, usually when I would do some kind of like high-end, a build that I care about, I try to use a decent thermal paste. And I usually go with the Arctic Silver 5, which is pretty good. And I thought this was like one of the best. And it might be, but it's like the low end of the good ones maybe. So I have heard a lot of good things about this stuff. Arctic, different company, MX4. So I'm going to go with this, because I've heard some really good things about this thermal paste. Now, I don't think the difference is huge between that and this. Maybe it comes down to just a couple degrees, but a couple degrees is a couple degrees. So I'm going to put the CPU in, I'm going to put the fan on, the heat sink, and then I'm just going to fire up and see if it even fires up. This thing was just, I know this works because I was just messing around with it, and I know it works, but you never know. Plus these motherboards, when they start putting the pins on the motherboard instead of the CPU, I've always really hated that. It seems a lot easier to damage the pins on the motherboard than on the CPU, and it's also extremely hard to fix the pins when they're on the motherboard as opposed to when they're on the CPU, as long as they don't snap off the CPU. So yeah, I really hated when they switched over to this, but what are you going to do? Okay, now we're going to take a quick look at RAM. If you're wondering why I'm going back and forth between an audio recorder here on a mic and what I recorded with the camera, it's because some things had changed and I don't know, the audio was just really screwed up and I was saying weird things. So rather than reshoot it, I'm just gonna record over here. Anyways, I end up only using 2 of these sticks. I didn't realize at the time 2 of them are 2 gigabytes and 2 of them are 1 gigabyte. That's 6 gigabytes with a Windows XP build. That doesn't really make sense. So I just went with 2 of these sticks. These are just Patriot sticks. I heard these were pretty good for overclocking. They have a nice little heat sink on them. I actually already had these, so there really wasn't any point in me going out and buying new RAM. This RAM, like I said, I read some reviews. It got pretty decent reviews. People said it was decent for overclocking, so may as well just use what I already have. And yeah, it does. I did have it running in dual channel mode, DDR2. Alright, so here's the hard drive we're using for the Core 2 Duo Extreme machine. It's just a Western Digital WD800JD. It is from 2007 and it's an 80 gigabyte, probably a little bit on the average or low end for the time. I seem to remember the average being at least 120 gigabytes by 2007, but or maybe even higher. I think I had 120 gigabyte, but it's hard to remember. But this wouldn't be like, I don't think this would be a top-of-the-line hard drive for 2007. But it's the only 2007 hard drive I have sitting around. It is SATA, so this is what we're going to be putting in. So I'm almost done with my Core 2 Extreme build, but the case was just bothering me. I did want something a little more era correct for that CPU and motherboard and everything. And I came across this SYX case at Goodwill for under $10, so I picked it up. This one even has the little plexiglass side to look through, so I think this will be a little bit more era correct. I do need to clean this case up. It's pretty beat up, but someone really jammed some sort of USB device in there because I cannot get it out. Even with pliers, the faceplate came off, but even holding that down and putting pressure, I cannot get that thing out. So yeah, removing that's going to be interesting. I don't know what happened there. Well, I finally got it out after much effort, and obviously that port is destroyed. I don't know how someone got that jammed in there or what it used to be, but it even cracked the case a little bit pulling it out. But I mean, it's a minor thing. It's no big deal, and I don't need it to be working anyways. It's just like a bonus thing. But yeah. Well, I think what this case was missing was a little bit of flare. So I put in, everything's dark, I don't know if you can see it. I had this really old, cheap, like fan controller light up LED screen thing I got from China for like 12 or 15 bucks years ago, and it still works, and it's pretty useless. I don't really use it. It was in a pretty old machine, but I had it laying around, and I just kind of like the way it looks. You know, it looks very RGB-ish, I guess. And so, and since I had it, I wasn't going to put anything in that bay, but I just put it in the bay. I don't even have it like hooked up to the fans to control the fan. It has like, you know, controls the fan speeds. You have a fan controller, and it also has like temperature sensors, which may or may not even work semi-accurately. None of that is set up or hooked up. It is purely there for looks. So when it turns on, it like has a little display and a little fan display, purely for looks. I also got one of these little Core 2 Extreme stickers. I'll put on this case somewhere to add a little bit of flair to it. Just on the side, we've got the clear screen. You can go through, you can see all the, you know, the lights in there and stuff. Alright, so here's our board ready to go into its new case. It's all ready except for I need to put the other RAM stick in there. But anyways, 2 more components we haven't talked about yet. We have to talk about that Ultimate 2007 video card I said I would mention, and the sound card, because I did decide to put in a discrete sound card, especially for EAX support. So here's the sound card I decided to go with, because I did decide I wanted to go with a discrete sound card. I did want to go with an X5 card. Unfortunately, this is the only X5 card I had spare, which is kind of, I think this might be the lowest quality of the X5 cards. This is from 2006. It's low profile. It's the SB0790, I believe it used the sound processing chip from the previous generation of the Audigy cards, and not actually the one used in most of the X5 cards. It does still support things. It does still support EAX. It does support some of the X5 features like the crystallizer and I believe the CMSS 3D sound or something like that. I don't know exactly what the acronym is, but it does support some features of the X5 cards. It's pretty decent. It's not too noisy. So yeah, there's no like game-ish ports or MIDI ports or anything. It's not too fancy. I don't even think it has any memory on board. A lot of the X5 cards had anywhere from 2 megabytes to the high-end ones I believe had 64 megabytes on, and I actually have one of those, but it's in a different build. So yeah, this will work. It's probably not much better than what's on the board itself, but like I said, it does give me EAX support and some fancier features. Alright, and here we go. This is the graphics card we're going with. This is pretty much the king of 2007 as far as graphics cards go, and this is the NVIDIA GeForce 8800 Ultra. Now, the 8800 GTX came out in late 2006. This guy didn't come out until 2007, though. It's basically just an overclocked 8800 GTX, which in itself is a legendary card. This actually even goes one step further than that, and this is the overclocked version of the Ultra. So this, I think there might have been some Radeon cards that kind of came close to this, but I believe overall this was the fastest card of 2007, or at least most of 2007. It has a very interesting design with the shroud. Has this little bump here. So I believe that's because if you wanted to do like an SLI setup, these would be pretty close together. So this came up a little bit so you could actually get some airflow. I believe that's the reason for this. These cards do tend to get a little bit warm, so I am going to do something I haven't really done that often, because I don't really work with a lot of modern cards with shrouds and stuff, but I am going to take this thing apart, clean it, clean the GPU, and put on some new, probably better than what they have at the factory, thermal paste and new thermal pads. So haven't really done that before, at least not on a card this new, and this isn't even a really new card. Like I said, most of my expertise is definitely with older stuff, so yeah, I've never done that with a semi-modern card, but I'll give it a try. And of course, with a card like the 8800 Ultra, we want at least a semi-decent power supply. So this is a brand new EVGA 500B power supply, 80 plus bronze. This isn't like a top-of-the-line power supply, but it should at least be enough voltage for doing some moderate overclocking and to work with that GPU. I've also tried to do some cable management. I am not known at all for my cable management. Oh, there's my phone. So anyways, yeah, I tried to do that a little bit to maybe help with airflow a little bit, but I think we've got this decent setup for our overclocking. We've got the nice Zauman all copper, what I believe it's copper, heatsink and fan. We've also got a fan here, so it's blowing the hot air out this way, and then this is helping to push it out. Our graphics card's going to go here with its fan. I also put a little fan here that's blowing this way because the back of that card tends to get a little hot. And I also have a fan here on the case cover, and that's blowing down on this area, the graphics card. So it's not necessarily pushing out anywhere, but at least it will have airflow happening
which should help. Also, there's a fan right there on the front, so this is a little bit louder than I would like. It's not as loud as, say, my Splinter Cell PC, which is ironic because Splinter Cell is supposed to be a quiet, stealthy game, but that thing has like 1 billion fans, mostly just for looks. It's not as loud as that, and it's not as loud as some of my older PCs, but yeah, it is a little bit loud. But the cooling is decent. Oh boy, I've been waiting to use this, class this channel up a little bit. Will it work? Ooh, look at that. Fancy turntable. Fancy. 8800 Ultra OC looking fine on its turntable. Alright, enough of that. So here's the interesting thing. I opened this thing up and it was pretty easy. The screws weren't very tight, and I think the previous owner actually did the same thing. These should be thermal pads, and instead they're thermal paste, and judging by the viscosity and whatnot, this seems fairly new. Within the last couple years, it's not, you know, it's not like caked on, and it actually looks, I mean, it's hard to tell just by the color, but it looks like it might be one of the, like a better kind of brand. Usually the cheap ones are like white or cream colored, and usually like the Arctic, you know, Arctic 5 or Arctic Silver, whatever, are more of this sort of gray color. So I mean, I'm already in it, so I may as well clean it off and reapply with the what do I have here, the MX4 thermal compound. This stuff is supposed to be one of the best. I feel like I didn't need to do this now, though, but yeah, I don't know whether I should put thermal paste on these or just use the thermal pads. I mean, they're meant for thermal pads, but I'm not sure what to do. Is the thermal paste better than the thermal pad? Maybe I'll have to do a quick check on Google. I mean, is there a downside to using thermal paste on the RAM chips rather than a thermal pad? I mean, originally it had thermal pads, but maybe that was just for cost cutting. Maybe putting paste on them is better. I feel like this really wasn't necessary, I guess, except it was kind of a learning experience for me. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm in here already, so I'll just clean it off and apply my own paste, I guess. Alright, so it's all cleaned up pretty nicely, and I do have the new pads here. Yeah, I mean, I just decided to go with the pads over the paste. I mean, obviously it was working fine with the thermal paste, but I've read some mixed things on the internet. It probably would have been fine with the paste, to be honest, but, you know, originally it did come with pads. The breakdown on this I found on YouTube. The guy was replacing, you know, with pads. Even though the machine, the PC I'm putting this in, I do plan to overclock the CPU and probably the RAM. I'm really not going to overclock the GPU anyways, even though this one is actually already factory overclocked. Even then, it was, a manufacturer felt it was good enough with pads, so just going with pads. You can tell me that I'm stupid in the comments, and then I should have went with just paste, but whatever. So I'm going to put this thing back together and cross my fingers and hope it works. Alright, so everything's pretty much put together here. We're pretty much ready to roll. This case has really grown on me. I mean, other than the issue we had here, that looks a little not so good, because someone had really stuck that that USB whatever in there and had some trouble pulling it out. Other than that, I really kind of like this case. It's sort of minimalistic, but it's still got some nice flair. You see, I got a nice little badge, a Core 2, just a Core Extreme badge. I always like putting those on there. Just got a simple black DVD-ROM here. The controller here, just nice. Kind of like a little bit too reflective for me, my taste, but I like the red sort of border. I just kind of like this case. Just the simple restart and power button. We've got our floppy drive. Not really a necessary feature at this point in time, but it can still come in handy on an XP machine. This little thing, you might be wondering what the heck this is. This board, as we saw earlier when we looked at the board, has the built-in Wi-Fi. So this is the little antenna that connects to the back. It's a magnet. Magnets and PCs, it still kind of freaks me out a little bit, but yeah, it's fine. So it just sticks on the top there as our little Wi-Fi dongle. And with that said, let's look at this thing in action. So quickly before we get into gameplay, two things I want to address really quick. If you guys watching my channel, you probably know last few videos I've had a lot of technical sound issues. I think that's pretty much cleared up. I think a lot of the issues was a lot of the times I was actually outputting from the speaker out instead of the line out, and it was causing a lot of distortions. I've been doing this for years, ladies and gentlemen, and I think at the beginning I was doing it right, and somewhere along the way I just forgot and just started doing that. I won't try not to make that mistake again. I apologize to those who have used headphones. I don't think it's been much of a problem for users of speakers or laptops, but if you're using headphones, it's probably blown out some of your guys' eardrums. I apologize for that. I think it's more or less fixed. This sound card actually only has one line out, and I know I've got that going into line in, so I think we're okay. The second issue I kind of want to address really quickly is the capture gameplay footage coming up is going to be in full screen. I think the reason for this is my primary display here, since my channel generally focuses on Windows 98 era, DOS era PC games where everything was full screen. My primary display is a CRT, a full screen CRT, and even though my capture computer and my capture monitor is widescreen and everything, when I capture it, it always captures full screen, even though these games are capable of widescreen. Now, it's very inconvenient for me to remove this monitor and put a widescreen monitor up here and then capture it in widescreen. So the footage coming up, you're going to see, even though these games definitely do support widescreen mode, they're going to be in full screen. I don't think that's much of an issue with you guys. I don't think it should affect anything really, except you're going to have black bars on the right and left. If there's a way to fix that where I don't have to swap out monitors or something, where I can keep my primary display in full screen and then capture in widescreen, let me know. I did some light checking in the drivers and online and stuff, but I couldn't really see an answer to that issue. So if anyone knows if there's a way to do that, let me know in the comments, but I don't think it's a big deal.
Alright, and yeah, it's booted up just fine, and just to show you guys what's going on here, of course we go CPU ID, and then I'm going to run the GPU equivalent of that too. There we go, our Core 2 stream. Right now I'm just running at clock speeds. There's our GeForce Ultra OC. You can see it's OC. We got 768 megabytes of GDDR3 on that guy, and yeah, I think the stock speed is 612 megahertz. So yeah, this guy, our 8800 Ultra, is definitely overclocked a little bit here if you look at the numbers. Alright, so this footage here is just kind of me mindlessly flailing around in the BIOS. I'm not an overclocking expert, so if you guys have any tips or tricks, let me know in the comment section. The first thing I did do is disable all these things under the CPU configuration, especially, well, the Intel Speed Step. That's kind of like their version of AMD's Cool and Quiet. It sort of throttles the CPU, I believe, depending on its usage, but I don't know if you have to disable all of those, but I read somewhere that you should, so I just disabled them all. Again, I'm not a super overclocker, so feel free to give me tips. I also didn't mess with timings with RAM. I've done that before with on a 486, but this time I just did not mess with the timings. The RAM did get overclocked a little bit, but I didn't mess with the timing. So after a lot of trial and error and experimentation, what I did do is I did raise the CPU multiplier to 13. I raised the overall front side bus to 277, and I raised the V-core to 1.47 volts, and I got pretty much rock stable or rock solid stability with those settings, and that gave me an overclock of a little over 3.6 gigahertz. So it's pretty nice. I went from 2.93, 2.9, a little over 2.9 to a little over 3.6 gigahertz. The RAM got a little bit overclocked, but not too much. Yeah, everything, I think I had one crash after I settled on that overclock. A lot of it was just figuring out, just upping the voltage by little bits till I got stability. I think the one crash I got was just kind of a random fluke. It was during a racing game, and then it didn't happen again after that. So yeah, you know, I'm not an expert on overclocking, but I'm pretty sure that's a pretty fairly respectable overclock for someone that doesn't necessarily know what they're doing. So yeah, the front side bus, I went from 266, which I think is the default, to 277, and the RAM like auto overclock from there, I believe, and then I had to up a multiplier to 13, and then I had to up the voltage. So yeah, those were the settings I went with. Please feel free to let me know in the comments if you know what RAM timing settings I should try, or if you guys think I could push a little bit more out of this CPU maybe. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Alright, here's CPU Z running with the applied overclocks. We got a little over 3.6 gigahertz, the 13 multiplier, and our front side bus is bumped up to 277 megahertz. Moving on, quick look at the main board stats there. Then memory, we went from 400 to 416 megahertz, a little jump there. Again, I didn't touch the timings. If anyone has any suggestions on if I should change the timings or what I should change them to, let me know in the comments. I'm not really an expert at memory timings and things like that. So let's move on to our one synthetic benchmark, 3D Mark 06. Alright, and here is my favorite little benchmark from this 3D Mark 06. Probably one of my favorite little benchmarks from any of the 3D Marks. I don't know, it looks really cool. I really like it. Anyways, after doing this benchmark 3 times and then taking the average, we got a 13,297 marks. So that was our average score from running this benchmark 3 times. Alright, we'll start out with Doom 3. We'll just do the Doom 3 benchmark. You can see I have EAX 4.0 HD enabled. We're run all benchmarks at 1280 by 1024, and I have full anti-aliasing on, so times 16 anti-aliasing for this game, and ultra quality graphics. So we're going all out here, so let's take a look at the benchmark. And for everything maxed out and with anti-aliasing as high as it is, we're getting very good performance here. Alright, so we'll just skip to the end of this benchmark and see what FPS score we get. And yeah, 56 FPS. Not 60, but that's pretty good for pretty much everything maxed out. Now I redid this again with a much lower 2 times anti-aliasing. I think at like 170 something FPS. So yeah, you've got a lot of room to play with this setup. I was pretty impressed. Alright, so now we're going to see how it performs with more moderate settings, everything to ultra quality, but we're just going to do ×4 anti-aliasing. We've got fraps running so you can see the FPS up there in the corner, and let's just take a look how this game works at those settings. Okay, now a warning for those of you wearing headphones. Like I said, I think the sound problem is fixed, but just in case, lower your volume a little bit and just raise it as appropriate so you don't blow out your eardrums, just in case. Moving on to Fear, let's do the built-in benchmark. Again, same resolution, everything set to maximum. And yeah, it does actually really well with the built-in benchmark. Now, I have read that the built-in benchmark isn't actually a great representation of how the game actually plays proper. So we are going to have some gameplay footage as well right after this benchmark. And moving on to some gameplay, yeah, this PC made pretty short work of Fear. Didn't give it too much trouble. It didn't really ever struggle that much, at least at this resolution and settings. There were some points when you had a heck of a lot going on that it would dip a little bit, but it was definitely playable. It generally stayed above 60 FPS, mostly. Alright, so here we're going to do the obligatory Crysis benchmarking here. Now, I'm running this game on high at 1280 by 1024. High settings, couldn't do very high, it was grayed out. That has to do with DirectX 10. I'm running this game in DirectX 9. You need DirectX 10, I believe, to run the very high settings, and it's an issue with XP, and you know, you can I think there's a way around that, but I really didn't bother. I think you get not as nice looking, but a little better performance with DirectX 9 anyways, at least from what I saw. Anyways, it's not horrible performance. It's certainly playable. Again, it's hovering around the 30, at least in this intro, but when you actually get into the action, it's actually not that terrible.
Check your objectives display. Cloak engaged. Maximum armor.
So in an effort to see if we get some a little bit better FPS, I did lower the resolution to 1024 by 768, kept everything else on high, no anti-aliasing or anything in any of these tests for Crysis. And, you know, we did see a little bit of a performance bump, but it really wasn't quite as much as I was expecting, but it is Crysis. So yeah, we didn't get a consistent 60 FPS here with the lower resolution, but I also didn't play with graphical settings. So yeah, I mean, your best bet probably would be to find a good balance between a resolution you are fine playing with and a graphical settings, maybe taking it off high down to medium, just playing around with the settings a little bit. But it was still perfectly playable as it is here. So here's another question. Maybe it can play Crysis, but can it play Crysis 2? Now what you're seeing here is what I originally tried out, which was at the 1280 by 1024 settings using high graphical settings, which for Crysis 2, high is actually the lowest of the settings. It goes from like high to very high to extreme or something like that. I thought that was just kind of funny. And I was using medium motion blur, and I was getting, you know, okay FPS. It's certainly playable, but despite the FPS, it did still feel kind of choppy. It didn't really feel like a good you know, experience playing the game at those settings. So I did decide to lower things a little bit more and see how it would go. And I did lower things to 1024 by 768, and I lowered the motion blur to light, I think. It's like medium, maybe low. And I had a much better experience. It actually more or less stayed around 60 FPS. And you can see here, even with these settings, it's not bad. We're getting over 60 at some points, but when a lot goes on, it really does drop. Now, I don't know a lot of the technical issues here. I don't actually know if Crysis 2 is better optimized than Crysis 1, but from what I remember, Crysis 2 was still, you know, rough on systems. So, you know, I don't know. So let's look at some footage of actually it running with the lower settings I mentioned.
Suits a major bioweapon. Runs around town in that thing, just spreading the virus. Hell, maybe even triggered this whole outbreak in the first place.
Listen, I'm outside the evac center. You have to get here. I don't know how long I can hold out.
Hold out yesterday, so anything that moves is a target. Cobalt 3 and 6, check the tents. 4 and 2. Cobalt 7.
That's it. Target sighted. Covert oversight. We have eyes on Prophet. Around the castle.
Okay, so here's Colin McRae Rally 2005. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Anyways, this is like the newest racing game I have. This guy's bobbleheads in that car. Anyways, yeah, I don't have a lot of newer racing games, so this is actually the newest racing game I have, and I wanted to mix things up since we pretty much only have looked at first-person shooters. Yeah, I suck at this game. I'm not great at racing games in general. But anyways, yeah, this is it, 1280 by 1024, only 2 times FSAA, anti-aliasing, and this machine just tears this game up. So yeah, let's give the machine a little bit more of a challenge, and let's set the settings up even higher. Okay, so here I pumped the resolution all the way up to 1920 by 1440. I pumped the FSAA, the anti-aliasing, I believe that's just another way of saying anti-aliasing, up all the way as well. And this PC still makes pretty short work of this game. We're still getting well over 60 FPS. So yeah, this game isn't too much of a challenge for this machine. Unfortunately, I don't have a newer racing type game to test. I actually don't have a lot of newer games, period. After about this time period, actually, about 2007-ish, I just don't have that many games. I think it's also the period of time where, you know, games you couldn't really get them secondhand anymore because everything required like Steam activation and annoying things like that. And I just stopped buying new games. And even for the PC, anyways, it even took me a while to catch on to just downloadable games on Steam. But yeah, I just don't have a lot of games at this point to test. And now with Steam giving issues, you know, if you're an XP user, it's not really supported on XP. I don't know if there's a fix for that yet, or if that's even actually happened yet. But when I tried to do it, I just got a thing where like Steam wouldn't connect to the server when I was trying to download a game on XP with Steam. So, you know, I couldn't really go that route. Or I didn't want to put too much effort into trying to go that route. But yeah, oh yeah, and the screen, yeah, it is cut off at the bottom. I didn't readjust my my capture device when I changed the resolution to this really high resolution, so it ended up chopping off the bottom of the screen. I probably could have fixed that, but like I said, I just forgot to adjust things to compensate for the new resolution. So yeah, that's it. That's pretty much all I have to say for this PC. I was actually really impressed with its performance. I really like this PC, even with the pretty decent overclock. It's been really stable. Like I said, I had one crash the whole time. It just happens. It's one of those random things. It's actually with this game when I first started it. But other than that, yeah, it's been really stable. With all the fans and cooling, it's a little bit louder than I'd like, but it's actually making me rethink things for my ultimate Windows XP machine. Now, if you remember at the beginning, closer to the beginning of the video, I was talking about how this video and this machine was not part of my Anatomy of series, and this is not what I would consider the ultimate XP machine. But there's some elements of this machine that's starting to make me rethink that machine, and I might be doing some more comparisons, and you know, maybe changing up my ultimate XP machine. It's being a little influenced from my results with this machine, which I actually really like, and I'm really happy with the overclock, and I'm really liking that CPU as well. So I'm glad I picked it up, even if it was an accident. Would have been, oh sorry, you know, 25 or 30 bucks would have been still a good deal for a QX 6800, but I'm happy with this CPU. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, suggestions, please let me know in the comment section below. And yeah, I've got a couple more new PCs and old PCs coming up. So you know, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Fight that.